Recently, the Palm Springs Kiwanis Club had another great speaker. Let's listen in.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here today. And I have to start out, today's election day, which is very important not only here, but in every city, every state, and throughout our country, because it's something that so many people fought so hard to do, is have the democracy where we can elect our officials. But I would not be here if it wasn't for this woman. I mean, Michelle, she was, I had read a really grassroots campaign. I had no paid staff, none. I had no money. I funded almost the entire campaign myself because I didn't want to ask people for money, because I didn't want to be owing to anyone. And my major opponent outspent me 4-1. And because of people like Michelle, though, we actually won. And Michelle spent, she said, and we had a side room, and she was there every day. She ran a group of people who made phone calls. And just before the election, she said, "Rob, you're going to win, and this is what you're going to win by, and this is the numbers." And I said, because she'd made like 10,000 phone calls with her group. And I said, "Michelle, that's impossible. There's no way we're going to do that." And these volunteers, Michelle leading these volunteers, came out within like a half a point of accuracy of what the actual election was, and all these other people who were paying for these big public relations firms were way off. So this woman is not only smart and amazing and hardworking, but you'd be lucky to keep her around because she's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Seriously. And then there's Sandra, but you already know her. Okay. But you mentioned the downtown, but one thing about Palm Springs is like no place else. In fact, I call it the drama capital of the Coachella Valley. And election time is like the period leading up to the Academy Awards in the drama world. But fortunately, after today, that'll be over, and we'll regroup and we'll move on and move forward with the future of Palm Springs. But what I think is very important in Palm Springs is, you can't live in yesterday. And tomorrow's not promised to anybody, but you have to live in today. But it's very important that we maintain, I think, what's the best of yesterday, which I think we do because we have 200,000 people come to Palm Springs for Modernism Week, because we have one of the greatest groups of mid-20th century buildings in America. I just got back from my 45th Annapolis reunion from the Naval Academy. I was there a couple weeks ago. And I was staying in a hotel in downtown Annapolis, built in 1776, and it was opened in 1776. And I thought, this is sort of mid-century. It's just a different century. But we have the best of yesterday, and we have, I think today, we're doing some really great things, and we have to think about tomorrow, because we have to make yesterday, today, and tomorrow all blend together. Now, I want to talk a little bit about downtown. What's really exciting is on December 14th, the Chamber of Commerce is putting together a huge celebration of the official opening of the downtown. You won't want to miss it. It's going to be huge. It's going to be on a Village Fest night. They're going to have bands. They're going to have bagpipers. They're going to have ribbon cuttings for the new streets in the downtown. We're going to bury a time capsule. And I think we're just doing it for 25 years. We want somebody to still be alive when they dig it up. And we're going to have Harold Masters paying for a huge fireworks show. We're going to have, it's going to be a really, really big event. It's going to be the biggest event in Palm Springs in 50 or 60 years. So that's December 14th. It's going to start in the late afternoon, and then there'll be fireworks that evening. So make sure and put that on your calendar. But we do want to celebrate this because there was a lot of controversy about the downtown and what was happening down there. But we got there, and I think what we're getting there is a perfect no. But I think we made the best of what we could do. One thing I'm very proud of is this council. One of the first things we did is, and if I may say so, it was my idea, but I usually but I very rarely take it, but I thought, we got to do something fast. So we had a joint meeting in the convention center with a lot of people attending, hundreds of residents, and we had the Architectural Advisory Commission, the Planning Commission, and the City Council in one room at the convention center, and in one long evening, we put all these changes through, and the Architectural Advisory Commission would discuss it. They would vote on it. They'd pass it over to the Planning Commission, which is in the same room. They'd discuss it and they'd vote on it. They'd pass it to us, and we'd approve it or disapprove it. So in one evening, we totally redesigned the downtown, and we reduced it by 49%. So where you see Starbucks going in, that site was supposed to have a building the same height as the Kempton. And that was totally unacceptable to us. And Block B, which is where H&M is going in, which is a little taller than I'd like to have seen it be, that was also supposed to be the same height as the Kempton. And that was going to be apartments, and that was really way too dense. So we cut the downtown down by half. So I think what we ended up with is pretty good. And what I think one of the most important things we did was the previous council had approved, Westman owns the Town and Country Center, which to me particularly, I always said that before I came into office that I would chain myself to a bulldozer before I let them bulldoze the Town and Country Center, because the Town and Country Center was started in 1948, and that was actually the changing of Palm Springs from sort of a Spanish, dusty sort of village, the Village Inn, etc., to the modern mid-century Palm Springs. That building is very important, and if you go in the center there, you all know it's very restful in there. Right now, it's all we're protecting it. We don't want one of those mysterious fires, so we're protecting it. It's got all sorts of fire detection and flood detection, and the roof's been repaired because we're not letting it be demolished by neglect. And we've got it all fenced in to protect it. But we're pushing the developer to Grit Development, which used to be Westman Development, to get that done, because originally the previous council had approved for that Town and Country Center to be bulldozed, and they were going to build the street that goes from the museum that goes down to Palm Canyon. Now that was going to cut all the way through to Indian Canyon, and they were approving it. They had approved it for buildings of 60 feet high, and that would have just been totally unacceptable in our opinion. So we designated it historic, and that will not happen now. The Town and Country Center will once again, in hopefully 2 or 3 years, actually the developers promised to paint it and fix it up in time for Modernism Week in February. And that's going to be done. So we really, I sort of like the idea of we've sort of put a Maginot line around that downtown development, because the 750 Lofts, which is further uptown where the Bank of America building was supposed to be, was going to be raised, and they're going to build some really very large building there that was too large, too dense, too high. Everything it was not in code. And the previous council approved it. We said no. We stopped it. And so that's, we want to maintain the feel of Palm Springs, but at the same time we have to move Palm Springs along, because we have to generate revenue. We have to be able to pay for police and public services and street repairs and all those things that a city has to do. So it's a very difficult balancing act to do that. But downtown is moving along. A lot of people always ask me about the state of the city. I called it Stonehenge. Right down here, the Lawrence Rail Project across, between Palm Canyon and Indian Canyon and Vallejo. If you'll notice, the gates are open there, and people are out there spray painting on the sidewalk, because finally Lawrence Rail closed on its loan, and so you should start seeing the concrete being poured. We've approved nighttime pouring of concrete, so because it's going to be so many trucks, we didn't want to block the traffic, so they're going to be starting pouring concrete from midnight to 7. And they should be starting in the next 2 weeks. So you're going to see that moving along. And that's going to be like 130 room and as Hyatt, which is a very high-end Hyatt, but it's not going to be that high. It's going to be large, and it's going to have underground parking for public parking. So I think it's going to be a nice development. Another one that's coming up, the Dream Hotel's been approved, which is going to be a beautiful hotel right across from the convention center. We just recently approved that, and you're going to see construction starting on that parking lot that's just to the north of the convention center. That's going to be working right now. And Melvin's, this week I'm going to a reopening of Melvin's, because as you know, our Lieutenant Governor and his sister Hillary, not that Hillary, but Lieutenant Governor, senior moment. What's our Lieutenant Governor's name? Running for mayor, for governor. Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom owns a company, and he and his sister Hillary have bought Melvin's, and they're taking it back to the original Melvin's. They're taking a lot of things off and taking the rooms and the restaurant back. I asked him if they were going to keep all the plastic vines in the ceiling of the dining room. He said, no, that's one thing that's going. But things are moving along. But in this day and age, even though money is inexpensive, the banks are still tight, and some things just don't work. The Cameron project, unfortunately, which is that very large project on south end of Palm Springs, across from where Magruder's used to be, that's been fenced off there. That developer's run out of money, so he's got that on the market again. So that whole development there has died, unfortunately. But that's one of those cases where there used to be a really nice shopping center there, and then somebody tore it down, and then it's been sitting vacant for all these years now. And that's the kind of thing that we have to make sure we don't allow to happen anymore. So a lot of things are happening in Palm Springs. A lot of them are exciting, but we're being very careful about exactly what happens and where it happens and what it is, because we want to maintain the feel of Palm Springs, the specialness about Palm Springs. I don't think there's a single person on our council who wants Palm Springs to be a mini Las Vegas. That is not what we want it to be. We want it to keep the feel of what Palm Springs has been for 100 years now, really. Finances. A lot of people have been talking about finances, and that's tough right now. You notice I have not taken a position on Measure D. I've explained at my State of the City and other things about Measure D and why the finances are very critical right now. One thing a lot of people don't understand is a lot of people think that, one of the big costs of the city that's being increased is pensions. And this is not just a problem with Palm Springs, it's a problem with every state, every city in the state of California. Why? Because all the city employees throughout the state and the state employees are under this thing called CalPERS. And CalPERS is the world's largest investment fund for retirement, pension fund. And it's the world's largest, it's huge. But during the recession, due to bad management, they lost 40% of their value. They lost 40%. So what they're doing is they're making up for that loss by increasing what they charge the cities and the state for the pension for their employees. So last year, for just our current employees, our annual fee for our retirement pension payments last year was $13.4 million. This year it's $15.5 million, and they've given us a new payment plan, and 5 years from now it's going to go to $22 million. That is if they make 7% on their investment. Now, how many of you think they're going to make 7%? So you can see the pensions have gone from $13.3 million last year to $22 million 5 years from now. And that is without our employees getting 1 cent more in their pension returns and their benefits. That's just CalPERS making up for their loss of their capital that they need to be able to make the money to pay the pensions. So unfortunately, that's something that wasn't the cities in California's fault. But we're having to pay for it. And what happens? That comes down to the cities, and the cities, it comes down to the taxpayers. So that's why, people. And one thing that's a lot of people don't understand too on this, and I've tried to make it clear when I talk about this. Yes, if Measure D passes, I think the tax will be 8.5%. Of that 8.5%, Palm Springs gets 2%, 2 cents. 6.5 goes to the county of Riverside and the state. And so if this goes up a half a cent, the city of Palm Springs will get 2 cents per dollar and not 1.5 cents. So we're not getting 8.5 cents per dollar. And of that money I'm talking about, we get one of those is Measure J. And so that 8.5% is very misleading. And also property taxes. What a lot of people don't realize is that I think it's 80% of the property taxes go to Riverside County. The city only gets a small portion of the property taxes. So that's a lot of funding that people pay in Palm Springs that they think is going into Palm Springs, but it's not. It's going to the county and to the state. But yeah, we're moving ahead because we have a lot of things that are exciting. One thing I didn't mention is the new downtown park. One thing the previous council did that I think was a really good idea, although if you went back a few years, they probably should have thought of this in the first place, but they didn't. They went back to Westman and bought 1.8 acres across from the Palm Springs Art Museum. And what's so exciting, the Palm Springs Art Museum was built in 1967, and the new one. It goes back to 1938, but there was other locations where they were located. And this is the first time since it was built in 1967 that you'll be able to stand on Palm Canyon Drive and look down there and see that magnificent E. Stewart Williams building. It's beautiful. And that sculpture that Donna McMillan bought recently out in front looks spectacular. So, the jewel of Palm Springs will not be in a jewel hidden anymore behind an ugly mall. It's going to be visible for everybody to see from downtown. So that's very exciting. But right across from the museum is the new downtown park. And the new downtown park, the city bought that 1.8 acres back from John Westman for $5.3 million. And we're putting $8.3 million into it now to totally redo it. But the design is that we've worked very closely with the Palm Springs Art Museum, and they've actually they recommended a landscape architect, which the city used. We had numerous public meetings on this, a lot of public input. The plans are on a website. They got over 2,000 inputs from residents of Palm Springs on suggestions and ideas. And it's going to be spectacular. And so originally, with the previous council, they wanted to put like a fence around it and use it for rock concerts and all that kind of stuff. And we said, no. There's not going to be a fence around it. It's not going to be for big performances. It's going to have a small stage over by a very small stage for like small groups that'll be over near the museum. and over to the south of that, on that portion that's across from the museum, is going to be the Frey House, which is the Illuminaire House, which is going to be there, and also a sculpture garden. But the big piece of the downtown park is going to be in 3 sections. One section is going to be like a small grassy knoll where people could sit and listen to small concerts and performances. And then a big portion of it's going to be rest and relaxation, which is going to have shade, where people can sit out there with their lunch that they buy at one of the new 8 restaurants that's going in downtown. And they can sit and read a book, they can play with their kids, and then there's another section that's going to be like a lot of trees where you can go sit under trees. So you can have a shade section, a tree section, and a little performance section, and a huge water section with fountains and water parks and everything. And the design is beautiful, and I think people are going to be really excited with this. It's going to be a people park, not a commercial park. And I think people will really, really appreciate this. Yes?
Bob, are we going to get Marilyn back?
Off Top Dada is working very hard on getting Marilyn back. The City of Palm Springs is not paying for that, but it's a very complicated negotiation because there's the Johnson guy who's a sculptor, he's got a foundation. There's the Marilyn Monroe foundation. There's all these people that have to work with it, and there's rights to it and all this kind of stuff. So now Off Top's been working very hard on raising the money and working on the price for that, and I think he's really close. But right now there's approval we're going to be studying next Wednesday for them to go ahead and build a Virgin Hotel downtown, which is going to be right at the end of the park. And Maryland, they're talking about Maryland Park, the very small end of it, right on the far east side, furthest from the museum, because believe me, the museum doesn't want Maryland anywhere near it. So it would be right at that end of it, and it would be right on where Bilardo cuts through there now. On the other side of Bilardo would be the new Virgin Hotel. So my suggestion is we will call, if she comes in, we'll call her the Virgin Maryland. So now hopefully Marilyn could come in. So I have a tendency to talk too long, so those are some of the highlights I wanted to talk about. So what I like to do is answer questions, and then you give me the hook. Questions, yes.
What's the plan on the completion of that park? I mean, a date on the completion of the park?
That's a good question. A couple of the big things are done. We've got the money. The money's set aside. Most of it's coming from Measure J. In fact, all of it's coming from Measure J. And we've got the final approval done. So the money's done and the approval's done. The architect's working on the designs now. I would say we should see it opening in about 18 months. It takes the city forever to get anything done. It drives me nuts.
Too many cooks.
No, it's just the procedures. I mean, everything is the red tape in city government, state government is just mind-boggling. I was in the Navy for 26 years. I worked at the Pentagon, at the Puzzle Palace a few times, and even the military is efficient compared to city and state government. So it's just a lot of procedures. We've got to make sure there's no snail living there that might be disturbed and that kind of stuff. But then we'll get a bill. I'd say a year and a half.
I have one question on CalPERS. You talk about the revenue side. Anybody address the expense side?
You know, that's a state thing. All we can do in the cities is complain. The CalPERS is an independent organization. They're controlled by the state, not the cities. One thing that is somewhat open for discussion is the fact that CalPERS has a lot of restrictions on them on what they can invest in, because they don't invest in anything that's not socially acceptable, or could be an environmental impact, things like carbon fuels and that. So they have a lot of restrictions on their investments, and the teachers have also a retirement fund, and they don't have as many restrictions. The teachers fund has done much better than CalPERS. But this is something our legislature really needs to take into consideration. Every time I talk to our elected representatives in Sacramento, I tell them, you guys in Sacramento have got to get a handle on CalPERS, because the cities cannot keep handling all this. How would you like it if you lost money in your investment fund and you didn't have to worry about it because somebody else was going to give you your money back? But that's the way it works with them. And I think my personal opinion is I think the lack of personal responsibility they have is abominable. It's terrible. And the legislature's got to do something about it. And they're going to have to, because if they don't, this is personal opinion, if they don't, they're going to bankrupt the state of California. Because we can't keep this up. We cannot keep this up. It's always a pleasure to meet you.
For more, go to KIWANISPalmSprings.org.